honor of this responsibility. Thank you for loving us. We pray for your guidance in making decisions, both great and small, that may impact future generations long after we are gone. Grant us the wisdom to lead amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and the needs of our constituents, the ability to listen with an open mind, and to work together in harmony and respect. Lastly, we pray for our new corporate council. We also pray for our members who have recently lost loved ones. We place this meeting in your hands. We pray in your most blessed name. Amen.
All right, roll call. Supervisor Kinner, there we go. Right on schedule. Supervisor Dell said that he will be late. And Supervisor Brown, okay. Well, that's roll call either way.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just for supervisors, both new and old, because we are in a different venue, be sure to turn on your mic. That is the right-hand button that looks like a person. And what will happen is you'll see a green light where your mic is. So when you are addressing or speaking, please use your mic. And then when you're finished, please turn that off. Otherwise, there will be lots of background noise. Thank you.
All right. Now I would look for a motion to approve the agenda that you have before you. Supervisor Swaggle. Second by Supervisor Langto. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Citizens input. Do you have anyone wishes to speak to the board?
There's no one that has signed up.
Okay. Does anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak to the board? Very well. Appointments.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you did the board agenda, but you did not do the board minutes.
Oh, sorry. I've got the cameras rolling over here and I already messed up. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Augustine, second by Supervisor Haskey. Any discussion of the minutes, corrections? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Appointments. We have an appointment.
We have two. Corporation Counsel, David Depot.
I have a motion. Supervisor Kinnard, second by Supervisor Vollenweider. Discussion, questions. Supervisor Teske.
We like to hear from him.
What would you like to hear from him?
I'll do this as kind of an introduction. I did put his Mr. Depot's resume in front of everyone's spot to give you some general information as to his experience. As you can see, he has had experience in both law enforcement. His current practice does a lot from the family law side. Corporation Counsel for Kewaunee County will be predominantly servicing the Human Services Department. So we've been able to get a good find, and I am strongly recommending his approval. And with that, I'll let Mr. Depot say a few words himself.
All right, well, I would stand to address everybody, but I think the microphone may not pick me up for those who are remote, so I'll sit as long as everybody's okay with that. So my name is David Depot. I am a resident of Brown County. I was born and raised in Brown County, but I grew up in Kewaunee County. So I attended school at Luxembourg Casco, graduated from there, and then went on to NWTC, BWGP, and kind of had careers in schooling in a sort of non-traditional path from there. So went to school to be a police officer, was hired by the Milwaukee Police Department, worked down there for a number of years. My wife said, that's enough of that. We got to get back home and start a family. So we moved back up here. Law enforcement, if you can believe it, is different in Milwaukee than it is here. So I decided I wanted something different, went back to school at UWA, and ultimately went to law school, and when I got out, started my own practice here in Luxembourg. I've been here, and we've been here since. So I've left Kewaunee County or Brown County a number of times. I've always come back. I certainly hope that at this point I'm here to stay. Other than being an attorney, I'm a father. I have 4 children. My youngest is 5, just turned 5 last weekend. My oldest is 14. So got 1 boy, 3 girls, and the house is constant chaos. So anybody wants to lend a hand, let me know. Set up a schedule. But that's a little bit about me. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any other Supervisor Teskey?
We welcome you and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Questions? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next appointment?
Business Development Loan Program Review Committee. We usually appoint our corporation counsel. So with that, we have removed Mr. Jeff Wisnicki, and to replace them, it is our new corporation counsel, Dave Deppo.
Do I have a motion? Supervisor Langto, second by Supervisor Kroll. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Annual reports and other reports to the board as requested. Do we have a report from the administrator?
We have no report tonight. I will leave all that time instead for the next item, Mr. Chair.
Well, then we will go to the big item on the agenda tonight, the new public safety building and financing information. Who goes first? And please introduce yourself when you come to the mic.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kurt Berner. I'm from the Samuels Group. Brad Kewaunee is with me here from Venture Architects, and we got a PowerPoint. Am I getting too much echoing here? We have a PowerPoint here that we're going to present to you. Ultimately, the last 10 slides that I want to show to you is really why we're here tonight. We've been working with the Jail Strategy Committee to finalize a schematic design and a budget for the jail that you talked about back in 2019. So what we did is we dusted off a PowerPoint that had that 2019 date on it. And we're going to go back and kind of go over the history of all the work that you've done already to be able to get to this design and to get to the stage of the jail. Because I know there's a couple new members here. I know some of you may not be up to speed on what happened back in 2019. So I just wanted to go through this. So I'll move pretty quickly through the first slides. If there's questions while we do the presentation, I would encourage you asking questions while we go through it. And again, the meat of the study or the work that we did with the Jail Strategy Committee towards the end. So go to the next slide here. This just gives you an idea of the outline. We're going to talk about the background needs assessment from both the beds count and the physical assessment, some action plans and selection options that you had looked at, some recommendations, and then the next steps is really what we're going to be talking about here later on this evening. The next slide, you can go to the following one here. Next slide here, I think you're all probably aware of your existing facilities, the courthouse and the safety building, and we're really focusing on the jail and the 911 for tonight's discussion, because that's what the scope has been narrowed to through the finalization of the study at this point in time. The next slide will show you the steps that you've completed. So the needs assessment and the operational program is what was completed before this phase. And we finished the schematic design along with the budget, and that's what has just been finalized, and that's what we're presenting here to you tonight. So the needs assessment, we're going to show you here exactly what existing conditions are there, what you need to be able to operate and function in a jail based on the number of inmates that you have, and then the operational program is really a space program. It's not NASA. It's a space program that identifies the space that you need to be able to function within the building. And then the schematic design, you're going to see a preliminary floor plan. I stress that it's preliminary. As you move into the next phases of design, it will definitely get tweaked, but it gives us and given us a place to be able to put together budget and some plannings on a much more detailed level than we had before. So go to the next slide. Following one. So the future bed needs, the way that had been completed was collecting and analyzing the information and really identifying what your AD or your average daily population is. And that's how we got to those numbers. The next slide will show you, next slide, that talks about the changes that could happen in the future. So your ADP is something that's fluid, right? They go back and they look at historical data, but they will also do some projections in regards to what's happening with inmate populations. And those are identified in this initial needs study. Next slide. To show that there was a continued increase since 2009, the ADP had increased by 49%. There was a slightly slower, a lower rate of increase by the females, but overall a 4.9% ADP per year increase. Next slide. So the main number that we're looking at here was a total projected bed count of 82.2. What happens is we look at the 61.4 was the projected ADP. There is a peaking factor that gives us some fluctuation in regards to that bed count. There is an 85% rule that we like to look at in regards to the housing and the capacity of the jail. So you don't want to have them full. If you have an event where there's a bunch of arrests that take place, there has to be beds available. So that is some of that peaking factor that's in there. Classification factor, we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into the design. So classification across the state has become a more relevant topic in today's inmate population than bed count. And what classification is a determination of where each one of those inmates should be housed for not only their safety and security, but the staff safety and security. And there's a lot of elements that go into classification, and we'll touch on that a little bit more as we move through the presentation here. Next slide. So in phase two, what they did is identify the projected bed was further refined to the types of bed, housing separation rules, classifications that we talked about, the size of the housing units. We've actually seen in more recent designs that those housing units have been smaller than larger, because then one individual won't affect the overall classification. There's a need for special needs on an increase, not only in your county, but throughout the state. And then obviously short-term detention in regards to those phases or those classifications. Next slide. So these are some of the existing conditions of your jail, and part of that phase was to go in and identify the deficiencies of your current site. There's several. The building was built in '68, 54 years ago. We had to update the slide when we showed it to the committee because it said 51 years ago because it was 3 years ago. So you have been at this for a while in consideration of this facility, and the facility hasn't gotten any better over the last 3 years. So it's one of those things that we need to be aware of, that there are ongoing issues with the building. So there's roof issues, there are security locks, there's windows and doors that have issues in associated with security. Next slide. There is HVAC issues that a lot of the stuff has been antiquated, isn't performing the way that it should be. It doesn't meet the outside air requirements that are there, and there's no backup heat if the boiler goes down. You typically see a redundancy in a public housing setting like this. So there's many issues that are associated with the physical condition of the existing jail. Next slide. Fire suppression, there's only a fire monitoring system. Obviously a health safety issue associated with the way that should be identified because it's a 24/7 operation. Next slide. Plumbing, many of this is antiquated. You can see by some of the pictures, and then it's hard to see on a PowerPoint like this, but there's a lot of corrosion. There's issues associated with the drainage and just overall the life of that plumbing system has already been met. It needs to be updated or replaced. Next slide. Electrical lighting fixtures are vintage 1968. Jail area fixtures are not detention grade, and what detention grade means is that when it's in a housing area for an inmate, is that it cannot be compromised by those individuals that are in that space. You don't have that in many of the locations that you have here. And then there's manual controls. There's not anything that's automatic. Next slide. Electrical building services are overloaded. There's many code violations that are tied back in with the backup generator. The electrical panels have lived beyond their useful life. And then there's in the secured area, there's also outlets and switches that are not detection grade. Next slide. And a fire alarm system, no smoke, heat detection in certain locations. There are many blind spots with your video surveillance, and that's obviously a liability issue. No Sally Port cameras, and that Sally Port booking area is some of your most. It's a volatile space when you're dealing with a new arrestee and being able to bring them and process in from the process. And then there is no electric control of cell holder door locks. So if I had to wrap that up in a summary, because that your jail is a 1958 jail, it's not up to date in regards to what code requirements need. And your staff has been challenged with being able to operate and function within that space. We think they've done a great job, but it's one of those things that there's many needs that needed to be addressed. And obviously you all took action and understood that back when these were presented to you. So I'm just kind of giving you a background, but there were these selected options just to remind you of the items that were determined. So this was just a map kind of showing the existing facilities that are in your county. I'm going to the next slide. Here's the options that were considered, and the areas in red that say remove from consideration was remodel the public safety building, new jail only on site for obviously purposes in regards to cost and effectiveness to stay in operation. There was some consideration of just abandoning, and we'll get into that. There was some consideration of addition and remodel on site. And then the viable studies were a new law enforcement center on site, new jail off-site, or a new law enforcement center off-site. And the difference between the jail and the law enforcement center is the jail is just a jail function. The sheriff's office is not tied to that. Then we'll talk about that a little bit when we get into the plan that has been developed. Next slide. So this was abandoned, and I won't bore you with reading all the details. I think you've all seen this before, and the reason for abandoning it had to do with operations and liability of being able to house inmates at other counties, and that ended up being one that wasn't a viable option. Next slide. Same thing was an addition and remodel to the site. There was consideration of where that goes, phasing and complication in regards to being able to tie those areas into space, and then just the overall cost of being able to do it was much higher than if you found a new location to build a standalone jail. Next one. This was a new law enforcement center and a sheriff's office on site. Again, many of the same items were there, it just was not cost appropriate. Next one is a new jail off-site, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. And the jail operation is really just only that. We're talking about a housing area, we're talking about pre-booking Sally Port, and we're talking about program space, and we'll show you a floor plan here in a bit. And then the last one is still an option. If you go to the next one, this one is still an option. It's still in the master plan, and we'll explain that here in future. It would be the ability to add the sheriff's office to the campus once you build this jail. We could call it another phase. Master plan is really putting together a roadmap for you to continue to add out of that campus without having to rework the work that's already been accomplished in a prior phase. And that's really the approach that we've taken here to present to you tonight. So next slide. So then it came into a final recommendation, county beginning planning for a jail, and that's really what this next step was. So it was referred to as a phase 3. We call it schematic design, where we start with the concept of building that new jail somewhere at a site to be determined, and then identify what is the best layout, what is the appropriate size, what's the configuration of the campus, how do you deal with inmate flow from a booking process to also release. All those things were discussed. And I do want to share with you is that the committee had done a great job challenging a lot of things that are common practices within within the state of Wisconsin, and asked questions, and they were great questions about why do you do it this way? Because quite frankly, from county board supervisors, when we deal with them throughout the Midwest, most county board supervisors aren't jail experts. A lot of them haven't been in a jail before, don't understand how that functions, and they've hired people to do that. So it was good to be able to have that discussion and talk about the strategies and how those things need to be done. So recommendation, I'll just cruise through here because I've kind of spoke on most of these. Why the reasons for a new jail, why the recommendation. Again, physical condition of the jail, the current design impacts operation, inadequate bed capacity in future jail needs. So let's just blitz through these ones here. You can see some of the pictures that are there. I don't want to bore you again by repeating what we did, but this is the reason why it was recommended in regards to the inadequate size and the design that's there. I didn't even touch on that your jail is a linear jail, and we're proposing a modular jail. Ultimately, what that boils down to is that a linear jail is specifically that. The cells are in a line. It's a long corridor with cells that are along the side of that corridor. Sight lines are a large issue. It becomes a staffing issue. The modular design that we're going to show you is similar to the one that you see on the right-hand side there, where the master control or that pod control station gives you visibility into each one of those cell blocks. So we still have things cameraed, we still have them recorded, but you do have an individual that's there to be able to see all of the interactions that are going on in each one of those cell blocks. So go on to the next slide. Again, this is just talking about the size and the design in regards to what's there for the size of the cells. Next slide. In support areas, salad port isn't sufficient. Laundry isn't sufficient. There's many things that were deficient. Next one. And 911 dispatch, I didn't touch on that, but you'll see the work plan that we come up with. We've actually have a model here where 911 and dispatch will be on the same campus out there with the jail to be able to make sure that we've got that compliant in regards to the location. Sheriff Department, the next one. All right, so recommendations: bed capacity, didn't meet present or future bed needs, did not provide adequate housing for inmate classification, and all females are housed out of the county. And the proposed jail solution that we have will address all of those needs. Back to the 82, there was some very candid conversation about is 82 the appropriate number? And the 82 discussion really came back to classification, right? So if we would narrow this up, and let's say that we went down to 65 beds, and your ADP is at 61 for a projection, and we have to have that 85% limit in there, and we don't have the proper classification, it doesn't give you much flexibility in regards to how you house those individuals. And I'll give you an example. You may have individuals that come in, it's a female that's a medium. That individual obviously can't be housed with a male that is a medium. That's a given, right? In your world, there's many things that are happening outside of that may complicate matters. We've seen it happen throughout the state. Preparing for it, there are transgender issues that are tied back into there. There are special needs issues that come in that complicate those things. So we have seen the classification number should be somewhere between 14 and 16. That's what we've been seeing in many of the deals that have been there, to give them the opportunity to classify in those areas rather than just 6. Years ago, it was just 6. It was low, medium, and max for both male and female. That's not the case anymore. So classification really overrode what the bed count was. And really the bed count, when you think about the cost, and what I explained to the committee is that a lot of times people think that the 82 over 61 affects the operation. It does to a point, but it's not that you have to add additional staff to have those additional 20 inmates that are there. You can still operate that with the same number of staff, and it gives you the flexibility for the classification as you go forward. So just want to touch on that a little bit. Next slide. So next steps, these are the pretty pictures of where we got to. So to kind of explain to you how we went through this process with the jail strategy committee is that we came together and started to talk about proper sizes of the Sally Port. We went through the program, and we went through line by line of that space program. And members of the committee can talk about that and say, well, why do we have this many cells? Why do we have this many bathrooms? Why does the kitchen need to be this big? Why does the salad port need to be this big, right? We had some candid conversations. Is that fair to say, committee members? We did. And we talked about it. We flipped it up one side and flipped it back around the other way and challenged all of those things. We brought in comparable counties to make sure that we're not oversized. We also wanted to make sure that we weren't undersized, so that it was appropriately sized to be able to meet the operations of Kewaunee County now and well into the future. So I would say that your committee did their homework. They challenged the design team. They challenged us from a cost perspective because of what other counties have, what they've heard of what counties have cost when they build their jail, and quite frankly, the jail numbers that you hear, or just the correctional facilities that you hear in regards to budgets, vary drastically from area to area, region to region, from scope to scope. So we were able to lock into some of that information, and I think that committee members were informed in many areas that they had some questions on. So it was a good use of time. So this is a pretty picture that would give you a rendering of what the current proposed floor plan would look like as we would walk up to that new jail location. So if we go to the next slide, we're just going to buzz through some of these. This would be an aerial as you would fly over to be able to give you the idea of the layout. So obviously the entrance to the public would be on that left side there where it's lit in that area. On the opposite side over there would be the vehicle sally port. And what the vehicle sally port is where the sheriff would bring in their vehicles that would either be a squad or a van or a bus to be able to bring arrestees in. And they come into that sally port and they shut the door. And then operations takes place on there to get them into pre-book and then booking. So there's a function for that garage. It's not just a place there to keep people dry. There's actually business that's taking place inside that sally port. And there's a reason that it's sized appropriately. Next slide. So this gives you a floor plan, and I'm going to do my best to walk you through with the colors and the flow that's there. So you see at the top of the screen, that's that sally port that I referenced before with the overhead door. That's where an individual would come in through the, if they were being arrested and processed, it would start in that sally port and they would stay in that light green area, which would be the pre-booking area. And after they're done with pre-booking, they would then filter into the red area, which is called booking. And the booking area, there's obviously a booking station, and then there are what we call receiving cells within that space. After they get into booking, then they would go into the pod. The pod is the gray area. And you can see all those, I call them pieces of the pie. The reason that it's configured that way, the reason that it's laid out that way is for sightlines. So it's the intent to be able to see from that master control point as many sightlines as you can into each one of those jail pods and into each one of those cells. There will still be cameras that will record all of the functions that are there, but it gives another sight line for the staff to be able to see what's going on in that housing area. So the yellow area that's over there next to booking, that's dispatch. And then the blue area and the purple area down there is real jail, it's jail support and jail administration. The public entrance is down there to the pink. So it's kind of a layout in regards to how the configuration, and we've twisted this thing around, I would say a half a dozen or a dozen times. So shifting adjacencies, what makes the most sense. We did different pricing points in regards to how big the building got, different configurations. So the next slide is going to show you a mezzanine of the pod. So it's actually a two-storied approach. So when the officers sit in that pod control, they're able to see on that first floor, they're able to see up on the second floor into both of those cell pods that are there to be able to get that sight line. Next slide. This is a site plan, again, proposed site plan that's there by the administration building. Configuration is still going to be determined if the project is approved, but this is kind of an idea of where it would go. And you can see kind of the dotted lines that are there, and that's what the master plan would represent, is that this would be the first piece of the puzzle for your master plan. So the goal would be is if you as a board take action on this and move forward, you want to lay this master plan out for the next board. Because your board could look different in 2 years, right? And you want to be able to give them the direction of what the game plan is, meaning that we're going to put the jail here with the intent that when we need to deal with the sheriff's needs, The new sheriff's office is going to be built off to the right side, and there's configurations for adjacencies as to why it would make sense for the sheriff's office to be there. The main entrance that's there will maintain a main entrance, and then you can add on either a future jail pod. And I know most of you are saying we're never going to need another jail pod. Hopefully you don't, but at least you have a plan for that if you ever need it in the future, that you're not having to start from scratch again, that you could add another jail pod. And then the balance of the courthouse could take place in that long rectangular building that's there. So whether that means that the courts and the court system, or it means that the balance of the general government moves out there, it gives you a long-range plan. It gives you a master plan in regards to how you step into that. So this would be the first step of many potential steps that would give you the solution that you have for your county to be able to exit from some of your existing facilities. Next slide. Okay, so estimated project cost. When I say project cost, that's all in. That's professional services. That's the contingency that's in there. That's furniture that's in there, and that's construction costs. Okay. So the way that this project would be delivered, it would be publicly bid. There would be, obviously the drawings would be finalized and formalized. Those would be put out to contractors to bid. And when those numbers come in from contractors, that would be a portion of your $25.6 million. You would then have to pay for professional fees. You would have to have a contingency. I always recommend a contingency of a project of this size. And then obviously you have to furnish that to be able to provide the furniture for the facility. It includes all the site work, includes all the infrastructure for the site work. And that is a projected cost for a spring 2023 construction start. If you would decide to move forward with that design, and I know you're not taking action tonight, but if you decide to take action on that next month, from that time until you could put the project out to bid is roughly about 10 months for the balance of the project to be designed. So the floor plan that you see is just the first step. Once you give Venture the green light to continue with that design, it's going to take about 10 months until we have this thick packet of plans that can be publicly distributed for bidding. And then after you get the bids in, and we bring them to you for a recommendation to award to contractors, once you award or you authorize an award to those contracts, then construction can start, and we're anticipating a 24-month construction period for the jail. So if you would make a decision in July of 2023, the reality is you're talking about 34 to 36 months, depending on the approval process, before you'd actually move in. So that should give you an idea and time frame in regards to how that would look. So I'll answer the question before you ask it. How confident am I in those numbers? I would tell you that in any other market that we work with, I would feel very confident. What's happening, as most of you know, in your markets in the world right now is very volatile. There's discussion about whether those numbers are going to come back down, whether they're going to continue to climb. I've heard it from both sides. I've heard discussions that they will continue to climb for the balance of this year, and then they'll somewhat level off and stay consistent from there. I haven't heard anybody say, hey, I can't wait till these numbers will drop back down. The indication is that those numbers won't come back down. Now, construction has taken significant increases over the last calendar year, as have many other things, which I'm sure you're dealing with day to day. So time is of the essence in regards to being able to get this design and getting it to the point where it's bid ready. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to lock into those bids before 10 months, but the sooner that you can make a decision to get that started, the better it will be. And I want you to understand that you're not spending all $25.6 million immediately. You would have those preliminary professional fees that would be expended to be able to get to the point where you could bid it. And I know that Scott and the team are going to talk to you about finances. So just something to think about in regards to what that commitment would be, and then how do you go about the payment of that over the process of the project. So next slide. So the next steps would be to approve concept in the budget. And the reason we say concept is you're approving the floor plan, you're approving this budget, you give direction to us and say, you need to maintain that scope, you need to finalize the design of that. And when I say concept, is that there will be walls that will get moved when we enter into the next design. So that floor plan that's there is not set in stone. Quite frankly, that won't get set in stone until we get about 50% through DDs when we quit tweaking it. But you get an idea is that that's the intent and the scope from a concept perspective. And then approve the borrowing and project funds, which I know you have other items on the agenda to talk to that. And then it would be approve moving into phase 4, which would be that design development. Design development, there's actually 2 more phases in design. Design development really finalizes a lot of the infrastructure, the mechanical, electrical components that go into the building, obviously the structural components and civil infrastructure. Right now, we just have a floor plan. And you all know that it isn't just a stick of paper or a piece of paper. There's a lot that goes into the building, and all that needs to be done in design development. And then CDs is really finishing that up and putting the tweaks on those documents so they're ready to hit the street. So questions and answers. So I know I threw a lot at you, and I'm open to any questions from anyone.
All right, do we have questions for Mr. Berner from board members, supervisors? The supervisors have heard this information to a great extent. Do we wish to go into the finances, and then if there are follow-ups?
Sure.
Mr. Berner?
I'm not going anywhere.
That would be my suggestion, Mr. Chair, is have our finance director, Mr. Kunish, then go through the finances, and then we can open up to any and all questions.
Very good. So Mr. Kunish, take it away, and then we'll circle back if need be to Mr. Berner.
Okay, for those who don't know, I'm Paul Kunish, finance director. To my left here is Amber from Clifton Larson Allen, our auditors. And to her left is Brian from PMA. PMA is who's doing our financial advising and putting the debt together. So my purpose and presentation will take the $25.6 million number and walk through the process to get down to the question that I'm sure everybody here and listening wants to know: how is it going to affect tax bills? So to start off with, though, I've heard this once or twice in either finance or jail committee meetings about, boy, isn't it great that we started out with $400 or $200 for $100,000 house, and now we're down to 20 or 40, depending on the value. And I want to point out that yes, that's factual, but we're talking apples and oranges. That number came from about 2 to 2.5 years ago, when the very first design came out. We're looking at $33 to $34 million. We also thought that at that time we may need some for additional operations. An early estimate, and it had to be early because we're trying to estimate building maintenance costs for building out ahead of the design yet. So we put $1 million in there, and if you took that and issued bonds for it, yes, we have about $200 per $100,000. That is not what's coming forward. There was a lot of work to be done between then and now, including the fact that we now have a final design. We didn't come up with any other funding sources, which we will in a minute. ARPA funding, which we're going to apply some of that, didn't exist at that time. And we didn't look at our debt service, our existing debt service, and this possible debt service to see how those would fit together and how we can make it the best possible fit. So all that stuff has happened in the last 2 years. So what we have up on screen and in the handout in front of you is the project as presented. Starting with $25.6 rounded million. We will start by applying some existing funds to get that number down so we don't have to issue debt for $25 or $26 million. We have some fund balance available in the general fund as well as a debt service fund that can be applied. That debt service fund, if you remember, we've been putting money in there for about the last 3+ years. When we have extra money someplace, it goes towards early extinguishment of debt, or in this case, to reduce the amount of debt we'll have to issue. Now, our existing debt is at lower interest rates, I believe, than what we're going to end up issuing at. So it makes sense to reduce our future debt for this purpose. We have some ARPA funds we can use. The remaining balance after the Bug Tussle project is $1.765 million. And as a part of that whole process, the first 3 payments with Bug Tussle are happening before the ARPA funding period closes. So we'll apply those 3 payments to total $648,000 and change. bringing us down to 21 million of debt proceeds that we will need to issue. So everything else going forward is based on issuing $21 million worth of bonds. The bonds we'd issue would be best estimate right now, right, as of 6/6 was 3.75%, $21 million issued over 20 years would be an average annual debt service payments of 1.8 million and change. If you look at our last 2 to 3 years worth of debt service payments, they've always been approximately 1.5 million. In bonds fluctuate a little up and down. They've been always getting very close to 1.5 million. That average comes out to 1.535 million. So the increase that's going to end up on the tax bills, if this project is approved, would be an additional 342,385. So if you want a picture on page 2, you can see how our existing debt service payments, the blue, the gray, and the yellow, will be supplemented or added to by the proposed jail debt, which is green. And you can see that what it was, about 1.5 million, will be increasing to 1.8 million. Next page, and here's what everybody came for. So if we have an additional 342,000 annual average debt service increase, and we have a total assessed value in the county as of 2021, that's the most recent available, of 1.717 billion, it comes out to a rate of 20 cents per $1,000 assessed value. So put that in the standard typically talked about, that's $19.94 per $100,000 of value. I did look it up, I believe it was on our last housing study. The average home in Kewaunee County was about $157,000. So the average home would be an additional $31.44. This is per year. And just for giggles, on the bottom of this, I know there's a lot of bigger houses out there. A $200,000 house would have an increase of $39.87. So this project, if approved with those additional funding sources or that amount and bonded in this method, would be an additional $19.94 per $100,000 of assessed value. The next page, as was brought up a few seconds ago, the market we're in now is just different. The next page takes a quick look at differences and changes, potential changes because of the interest rates fluctuating. So Brian from the PMA put that together, and I will.
Well, thank you, Paul. Glad to be here tonight. I just wanted to try to put something simple together that would give the supervisors an understanding of how sensitive to interest rates these estimates are. $20 per 100,000. So the base case, which here is that Paul uses this 3.75, and then I showed for 4.25% is the average rate, 20-year borrow rate. And every time it goes up a quarter point or 25 basis points, it increases the annual debt service payment by about $35,000. You can just see that pretty clearly here, going from about $1,865,000 to $1,895,000 to $1,933,000 to $1,970,000-ish. So that it's very easy to to understand what rising interest rates could do to the finances here, the impact on the debt service levy. So it's it's about $35,000 a year. So it's not we're gonna hope for the best and do everything we can to keep it as low as possible. But even if it went all the way up to 4.5%, that would only be about a little over about $105,000 a year in debt service over our current estimate.
Are there questions for any of the finance folks and the auditing firm? in the middle, right?
Yes.
Okay, so probably should give a little bit of explanation as to why both of these individuals are here. And the reason for that is because all of these numbers are interesting, of course. I don't know how well all of the supervisors understand the numbers in the presentation, hopefully reasonably well. But yet, not everyone has an accounting degree and so forth. And I know that there were a lot of questions raised. Well, how do we know if these numbers are accurate? How do we know if the assumptions that are reasonable? So I decided that it would be prudent to get an outside set of eyes to consider it. And when I talked to Chair of Finance Committee Supervisor Brogdon, it was suggested we talk to our auditing firm who has the greatest knowledge of the county's assets and is apparently just highly respected and widely respected. So that's a good thing. So, yes, I'm very grateful that you could be here this evening. So I guess the question would be, I mean, you've listened to this, and I'm assuming, as our outside auditing firm, that these numbers, this all does appear to be based on reasonable assumptions and workable.
Yeah, in reviewing both obviously the cost estimates that comes, that's as is, but the application of, using the other funds, the calculations, everything we can see, it seems like it's a appropriate calculation. It gives you a reasonable estimate, obviously with interest rates, construction costs, things like that. That's all going to change, subject to change, but the basis for the calculation, to our knowledge, seems reasonable.
Are there any questions in that regard? Yes, Supervisor Lewis.
If this was approved, let's say at next month's meeting, at what point could we lock in an interest rate?
Please,
Thank you. That's a great question. I can understand why in a rising interest rate environment, people would be interested in locking it in sooner than later. But for the most part, you don't really want to lock in. You don't want to borrow money and start paying interest on money until you have a plan to spend it. So there are things that we could do to hedge against rising interest rates. But for the most part, you really just want to wait till you get bids or you're near getting bids. And that's an appropriate time to borrow. You borrow too early, there's two things. I mean, you're paying interest on that debt. And you're going to borrow on a tax-exempt basis. That means that investors don't have to pay. Investors that have a federal income tax liability in the United States, they don't have to pay income taxes on any interest earnings on these bonds. So that's why government bonds, not only because they have such a great credit rating, but because the debt will be issued on a tax-exempt basis. Tax-exempt debt has a slightly lower rate. So there are rules on how fast you're expected to spend the money. But bond counsel wouldn't let you go out to market too early, even if you wanted to, because you'd have to have a plan in place to spend the money according to certain benchmarks. Now, if you don't meet those benchmarks, it's not the end of the world, but you have to reasonably be expected or are expected to make them.
Other questions? Supervisor Kinney?
Auditor question. Taking money from our fund balance, we're comfortable with taking 1.4 mil out of there? Our fund balance is healthy enough to do that.
5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have said no. A little different story now. I think there's been some good practices that have happened. I think there's also some potential flexibility with that number, and obviously depending on costs come in. I think you've done a good job about being fiscally responsible in some other areas and cleaning up some other areas where your general fund hasn't been needed to be reliant in order to kind of subsidize some of those others. So I think, and obviously you're going to have some cost benefit. Yes, you're going to flow out of that fund balance, but you're going to save on some interest costs and things like that over the life. That's going to help you down the road too. So At the position you're in, I think you definitely have the flexibility to be able to do that. Again, saying, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, not the case in that. Obviously, going forward, though, we still want to make sure from an audit perspective, we always recommend certain percentages that you want to stay within that fund balance. So you want to make sure that you can continue to monitor that in regards to what your other future plans are. Obviously, this is one large capital project, but what are the other needs of the county? And how do you continue to maintain that fund balance and rebuild what was pulled out? And those are some other decisions down the road. But obviously, a jail, you have some other costs should you not do this project that are going to potentially into that fund balance as well.
Our debt load for borrowing for the county is adequate, below where it should be, ability to borrow money when we.
I don't have that exact number in front of me, but maybe Paul knows it off the top.
We're in the 8 to 9% of our legal debt limit. And to the previous question, even taking out 1.4 million was all of our general fund, we are still solidly in the center of our fund balance policy range. So we would still be okay even after transfer 1.42.
Just one thing to add to that.
Please speak to the microphone. They'll never hear you. Or that one you can use either way. I just need you in a microphone. That one was it.
I just thought maybe this one echo a little less.
Might help.
One good thing about this is that, this, as mentioned, this is a 2-year project, right? So this money doesn't need to come out all in 1 year. So you'll have years to kind of help fill it up if you're able to, and then you might be pulling some dollars out of future years that you've added a bit to it. So it's not a one-time hit. So that's a positive.
Thank you. Other questions? And supervisors, no other questions? Supervisor Garkey?
As far as the future staffing, can you explain how that's all going to come into?
In conversations with the sheriff's department and with the new facility, we project that 5 additional staff, 5.5 additional staff will be needed. 5 will be jail staff or dispatch staff, but the other half would be maintenance staff since we have a larger facility. We are able to, and I've been looking at this project for a number of years and preparing for it. The staffing level that we have currently for 2022 is the same staffing level that the county had 7 years ago. Knowing that we were needing to do that, we believe, or at least I believe, that we are going to be able to add those additional 5.5 staff as well as the operating costs and be able to incorporate that into our current budget. So we have been being very frugal over the number of years, and knowing that this was on the horizon, we wanted to make sure that we could therefore absorb the costs and not put additional costs upon the taxpayers from a tax bill standpoint.
Other questions? Okay, here's what I'm going to do at this time, unless there's objections from the supervisors. I'm going to go a little bit off of our normal rule of order, and I will allow, if there are members of the public that wish to ask a question to any of these individuals. We don't normally do this, but it's a big project, and we've tried to be as transparent as possible on this, and this is kind of the time to get questions answered if there are any. So, are there any objections from the supervisors if I allow a few minutes for questions from members of the public? Yeah. Who wants to be the supervisor that says no? I want to let the public speak, right? So if there are members of the public that would like to ask a question, please do so from the mic, and please, be succinct as possible. And we'll do our best to get an answer for you.
And also please state your name.
Yes. Are there members of the public who wish to ask a question regarding the project? Mr. Schmidt. I know who you are, but still state your name when you go to the microphone. There's the possibility that there might be somebody in this building that doesn't know who you are. No, I doubt it.
Thank you for the opportunity, the transparency that you're presenting to the rest of the board. About half of this board has turned over in the last 2 elections, even though that's only been about 2 years. So I know about half. I've never really had any issues with the board. I thought everything generally was kept on top of the table and open. And a number of the supervisors did ask questions, and whether you agreed with it doesn't matter. It's the democratic process that I enjoy being on. My questions were, when I found out that they were going to have the auditor here, was that the breakdown of, sounds like it's $40 for $200,000 assessment. And is that over the 20 or 25 year term, or does that change either something?
Yeah, could be $20. Sorry, $40 approximately per 200,000 value.
Yeah, I appreciate you up that to 200,000 because that's much closer to reality, even in Kewaunee County here. You did touch on the second question I had, and that is to present issues for the county, future boards, or this board on future spending. And you touched on it, saying it depends how you keep the budget surplus or balance going. I'm not an economist, but I had 3 small businesses, so you run into things you think are common sense. Could that possibly affect the county credit rating?
So is your question, well, is it likely that this single borrowing for $21 million would affect the county's credit rating?
Well, if things don't go, I know you can't predict the future and interest in all these issues, but things change in a worst case scenario, or say things don't go, I don't know how you have it projected. Could that actually affect the county's credit rating? Then that comes into play.
Sure.
Investments.
I would say this, there's as the 20 or $40 per $200,000 house indicates, it's not going to have a material impact on the county's current debt service levy. So and you have very little debt right now. So I would say no, this would have no impact. It would be expected to have no impact on your credit rating.
Okay, my final question is the original impact to this was presented by the administration. To my knowledge, not a lot of knowledge is known by the actual board of supervisors. The original estimate was $145.43 per 100,000, which comes out to $290.86. That was at a time when it was at 34.5 million. Now it's roughly 30% less at 25.4. Yet this assessment to the taxpayer is going from $300 down to 40. And that's in print. So huge contradiction that I would like to have explained.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll turn that over to Mr. Kudish. Not a contradiction, but there's definitely we've changed the way it's being structured, and well, I'll let Mr. Kudish he can speak to that much more effectively.
Yeah, that's what I was touching on before I actually covered the slides. So we had a $34 million project. We were anticipating, again, early in the process, that we would need an additional $1 million per year to cover staffing and any other operations and maintenance and whatever else that building took. There was no fund balance applied to it. There was no ARPA funds available to be applied to it. We didn't take a look at changing debt service. We did have the opportunity also to refinance the debt earlier in 2022. and thinking how that would fit in if the new debt would be issued for the jail. We turned out not refinancing because it actually works out better and we have more flexibility to make this fit. After the call date, we can pay some of that off early as we need to. And the debt service was not a part of that calculation because that point was 2+ years ago and all that work hadn't been done yet. So it's two similar numbers, two very, very different points in the process. And I would say even for possibly two different purposes. The calculation of this is what's going to be on your tax bill really needed to go through all the work that the committee, the sheriff's department, the architects, the cost estimator, and everybody has put together to get to this point. And now here's the project as it sits. So you may ask, well, why was that number even put out? Because over the course of 2 years with a project this big, it's transparency. Here's where we are in the process. I don't know that anybody really expected to build a $34 million jail, but that was the starting point. And the question was asked, what kind of an impact would this have? There's your number. Now there's a lot of work to do, and 2 years later, fast forward, here we are.
Thank you. And you know, a lot of this is we've been preparing for this, and we've been very conscious of our finances. The board, you know, all of the supervisors have always taken a very conservative approach to spending, and so we've been able to get the hard work of Mr. Kunish, the administrator, and a lot of others. We've been able to get to this point where we have a project that certainly would be manageable for the county. Are there any other members of the public that have a question that hasn't been answered? Yes, sir, in the back, if you please come to the microphone, state your name and state your question. That's gotta be, it's not green.
Good evening, my name is Tom Vanderbeck. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief of the City of Algona. I'm also the Chairman of the EMS Council for the county. My question is, tonight when you did your presentation, you talked about dispatch. Not a lot about it. Is there any talk about the repair or the upgrade to the radio system at all with this plan?
Who would best speak to that? Is the sheriff or the chief deputy would be the one most knowledgeable in that area? If you answer that question.
I think I can address that question.
Thank you.
We upgraded our 911 system approximately 2 years ago now. That upgraded system can easily be moved into another building. And we actually set things up knowing that it's likely that it could move within its lifetime. So the system is up to date, it's under warranty, and we would be able to move it. There would be some complications with moving it. There's 2 dispatch centers, actually phones, setups, and we'd have to move one at a time to keep operations moving the whole time. But it definitely can be. I'm sure there would be some cost involved with moving it, but the entire system can be moved without any problem and without any upgrades.
Thank you. That didn't answer the question. Okay. I think
Mr. Van,
I think the administrator maybe has information on that.
I think what the question Mr. Van Ack is talking about is something separate from what is the jail and the 911 system. What he's talking about is the portable 2-way radio system that deals with first responders and the like. That is a separate issue from the jail. That is the issue that the sheriff has been having to address for a number of years now with regards to being able to communicate with folks with inside buildings and the like. But again, that is a separate issue and it's not tied to the jail project. It's a separate issue.
All right, that answers my question. Thank you. I appreciate the time to ask it. The only last comment I would like to make is I just want to make sure that the county supervisors are aware that our active 911 system is also down at this time and has not worked since June 9th. So I don't know, we're waiting for an update on that also. So I don't know if you've been made aware of that or not. And I'm not trying to put Jason on the spot by no means tonight. I just getting a lot of phone calls at home and the fire chiefs and things are asking for answers.
Right, sounds like public safety maybe needs to discuss that committee. So, thank you. Any other questions from the public regarding the jail project? All right, so what we're going to do is in the July meeting, going forward, everybody's wondering, under the July agenda, and I don't know if we'll have anything else on the July agenda, but certainly this will be on the agenda, the jail. And in July, the supervisors will have to make a decision whether to send the jail project that was presented to you tonight. Either you have the ability to either approve it in July or to decide to go to referendum. Those will be the choices at the July meeting. All right, everybody's clear on that. So if you have other questions that come up, please, contact me. We can get you, in contact with Mr. Berner or any of the others, Mr. Kunish. We'll get you information, and we want to make sure that we're prepared to make a decision at that time. All right. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I want to reiterate what the chair is asking is because this is the meeting before the final vote. And so if there are any concerns that you may have or any doubts, I guess now is the time to do it because we have the cost estimator here, we have the architect here, we have the auditor here, we have our financial advisor here, we have our finance director here. The last thing that I would want to have happen is July now comes and you have questions that the auditor or that the cost estimator or that the architect could have answered, and they may not be here to answer those questions. Or for that matter, we even have our jail inspector here. So if there was questions regarding operations of the jail, tonight is the best opportunity to ask those questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Something rattled loose?
It did. Question. In the event that we went to referendum, it will back everything up. And just for S&G, say we backed up for a year, what additional cost would that 1 year delay increase the price of the jail?
I will leave that to Mr. Berner as our cost estimator.
I left my crystal ball in the trip. I can tell you what happened this year on projects that we worked on. And again, I don't want to say this, to have you shy away from something, but we've seen increases of over 25% in this year in construction. There's elements of a correctional facility like the detention equipment has increased 4 times in cost from pre-pandemic levels till now. And indications, like I said, they're projecting that it's going to continue to climb. So I don't anticipate that the prices will come down, but I'm also not comfortable giving you a number. Historically, construction costs will escalate from 4 to 8% a year annually. And this last year has obviously been not normal. So do we have another 6 months, 10 months like that? It's anybody's guess, but I would anticipate that the prices would continue to climb. I know that's not the answer you'd like, but it's the best one I can give.
Supervisor Dale?
Well, I guess I got one question, and I don't really want to bring this up, but I'm going to have to because I'm not really understanding a little bit about the. Some people are asking me if we have to go, say, 3, 4, 5, or 6 years from now, and we have to, say, get another loan or a loan for the county building for the highway department. Is that going to be an issue at all for us if we had to do something at the county shop? Because I know it's in rough shape and got stuff on it lately for quite a bit. Is it going to be something that's going to hurt the levy, or is it going to just something that we would borrow, or has this been looked into?
It's been discussed, Mr. Kewaunee or Mr. Belt, one or the other.
Sorry.
You're not on.
All right, couple things with that. Do we have debt capacity? Absolutely. I would never suggest going up to 100% of the debt capacity. That's like going up to your credit card limit just because you can. But we can fit in more debt if needed. You ask about can it be done? Probably debt. Again, all the work that's happened with this project over 2 years probably should happen to that one as well. What do they need? What's the end result? How much does it cost? What other funds do we have that should be applied to it? I seriously doubt we'll get another ARPA payment, but if something like that would come along, that work needs to be applied to that and any other project coming forward. We have the capacity to do it. The real question is, what's the best fit? And that's a process to go through. So I answered half of your question, but the rest is all speculation.
Mr. Feld, you wanted to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's an excellent question, Supervisor Dell. We know that the jail project is something that has been needed to be done for a number of years. But in that same respect, to be financially prudent, you do not put all of your financial eggs into one basket. And if we were to have done that, again, we don't know what the future may be. There could be some other project where a building is damaged or the like, where we would have to have capital and funds available. So what I have tried to do is balance that need of trying to keep the impact on the tax bills for the taxpayers as reasonable as possible, but still allowing for some funds to be set aside for what could be future needs. So in that respect, we have not bet at, from a horse track standpoint, we have not bet all of the money on one horse.
Supervisor Dale, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to, so everybody's looked into this, that we're gonna have to do something probably with the highway department, but if we do, it would probably be something that would go in steps because of the money situation.
Well, not just the money situation, but again, when we're talking, just like with this jail project, it is a process. So it will take some time to do phase 2, phase 3. What's the site location? What's the layout of the building? All of those different types of things. So I don't foresee that we'll be issuing debt within the next 2 years to do a highway shop. But will we be doing it sometime in the near future? More than likely, yes. But in that time, we have been setting aside money. We continue to make good financial decisions with regards to loans from Bug Tussle and the like. So we will have funds available to start moving forward on other projects.
Other questions? Supervisor Augustine? Oh, everybody's got questions. We'll get them all answered.
As this jail project moves forward, are we confident that it's going to go south of the administrative building? And are there going to be any zoning issues being in a residential area?
We're confident that's where it's going to go.
To answer your question, Supervisor Augustine, we are confident that's where it's going to go. We also know from a legal standpoint that if a county owns property, we can zone it as we see fit. The other part is, I know that if there are some concerns regarding having a jail facility within a residential neighborhood, I would just ask, where's our current jail? It's in a residential neighborhood.
But it's in somebody else.
And to go one step further, it's across the street from a school.
Yeah. I think some would say it's not in my neighborhood. Supervisor Patricia.
One of the questions that I've been asked is, why do we need to do it now? Or why does it need to be done at all? Since we have the jail inspector here, it could be hear from the inspectors what the option.
If the jail inspector would like to give a brief synopsis, I think that'd be great.
That's what was the $1 million
Number on that question?
$25 million.
25. Well, good evening. For those of you that haven't met me or worked with me before on this project, and those of you that are new to the jail, or to the board and dealing with the jail. I've been coming here since 2005, so it's been a long history that I've had and shared with Kewaunee County, and I would be remiss if I didn't say from the get-go that your staff do an excellent job that they have. They really do. We've come to a passing point here within the past few years where it was recognized by this board that something needs to be done. You've had the studies done on the buildings. We didn't go into a lot of detail with that yet tonight, but there are a lot of code issues that simply aren't being complied with, not only on my end, which ends up being grandfathered, but in respect to that actual building that you're using. There's been a lot of cobble jobs that are going on with respect to what's happening inside of those walls. You've got reports from the electrical engineering reports, the structural, the roof, the plumbing. There's a myriad of things that need to be addressed in the current building. Our standpoint is this. We want the county to make the county decision that's best for the county. I'm here to help you work through that process. And I've done this with a number of counties within this region. I work with 16 of them, all locally around here that probably know that Calumet recently built a new jail. They face these same decisions. We just did a new pod in Brown County, face the same decisions that you're facing here. You have a number of things that have been pointed out. I'd be happy to go through any of those individually with you if you would like some answers from that perspective. But throughout this time frame that I have worked with, we've been very good at being a good partner to say, you're moving in the right direction. We have not gone down the road of putting a line in the sand because you are moving forward. So I guess that's a little bit gray, but we'd like to see you do the right thing for the right reason, and I'm fully supporting this. With that in mind, I don't know if you do know this, but from the get-go, I am within those meetings and a part of all of them to make sure that we're using things that are correctionally sound pieces of information, because as you know, not everybody builds a jail every day, and not everybody gets the opportunity to be a part of jail operations in the regard that I have been. So I bring that to you as a service, as well as hoping to partner from the state, which doesn't always sound like it's a good thing.
Thank you. Supervisor Vollenweider?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to mention for the benefit of the new members that you had asked the previous board if they felt there was a need for this jail, and it was unanimously agreed yes. So just for the benefit of the new members.
Yes, thank you. Supervisor Lozansky?
So this involves the jail inspector also. I know way back when the staffing was estimated to be 8, and then the sheriff and other people worked real hard to get that down to 6, and then he got it down to 5.5. I'm wondering does a jail inspector also approve that and agree with that assessment?
So here's when we go back to what the actual administrative code is that oversees the jail operations, which is the part that I'm responsible for. So the state does not tell any jail, any county jail or sheriff, the number of staff that they need to have to operate a facility. What we do is I help you go through an exercise from the National Institute of Corrections that figures out a staffing analysis. So you take data from all of your staffing needs, your posts, things like that, to figure out what exactly you need to work the type of layout that has been finally designed. The only time that there is a number that needs to be supplied to me is when there's double bunking in a cell block, but still that number is an agreement between the county board and the sheriff. It's just supplied to me. It just means county board and sheriff, we agree that these are the folks that it takes to run this operation. And it'll lay out the different posts. It may lay out staffing support, which could include medical, kitchen staff and the like. whatever you need to put into that operation. But we take a really good deep dive into that. But ultimately, it's up to the sheriff and to the point board.
Thank you.
To safely run.
Other questions? All right. Well, brief one, sure.
My name is Phil Steffen. I've been a Kewaunee resident for 17 years. In addition to that, I was a Brown County deputy for 28. I ran the jail for 17. I went through what you guys are going through. You have tough decisions to make. This board has done a hell of a job putting numbers together, putting decisions together to bring to you guys. The difficulty is you guys have a tough job. You have to go back out to the public and explain whether you're going to do this or whether you're not. Either way, you're in a tough spot. So learn as much as you can so you make good decisions without emotion. Because when you make emotional decisions, they tend to fail. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So Supervisor Gillett, go ahead.
Just one quick question on July's approval or recommendation to go to referendum. Will that be a majority or is that a 2/3 majority?
As a 2/3, we will have
no.
to have.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Chair. No, it is a 3/4. So, and when I say 3/4, it has to be 15 votes approving. If there's only 15 county board members that show up, all 15 must vote yes. So it's a 3/4 approval of the entire county board, regardless of how many are in attendance.
Well, I think I'm still correct because I'm expecting we're going to have 20 next month. And so out of the 20, we need to have 15 yes. And so to summarize, once again, to be very clear, what you're going to be asked to do at that July meeting, you are, and because of the way this is structured, because of the staffing, this entire project is able to be approved by the board, by the supervisors if you choose to. But you are going to be asked in July to approve this project as presented or to send it to referendum. That will be the choice before you. And you've heard all of the information here, and you should be well prepared to make that decision. And we will make that decision next month, whatever direction it goes. That will be the choice. All right, I appreciate everybody's endurance and appreciate all of the questions from supervisors and from members of the public, and also all of the guests here tonight and those that traveled. We're going to move on. Committee reports, I'm going to take all of them at once. Are there any questions on any of the reports, any of the minutes which you have seen? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. Go past recess because it's not necessary. And there are no ordinances to be read this evening, correct?
No ordinances, Mr. Chair.
We'll move on to consideration of resolutions. And we will take the first one.
Resolution granting the petition for Bridge 8, Town of Montpelier. Fiscal impact $9,936 from the County Age Bridge Fund.
Move to approve.
Motion by Supervisor Brownman, second by Supervisor Poppy. Discussion, questions? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next resolution?
Resolution granting the petition for Bridge 8, Town of West Kewaunee. Fiscal impact $32,000 from County Bridge 8 Fund, which will do 5 culvert replacements along Crock Road in the town of West Kewaunee.
Motion by Supervisor Poppy, second by Supervisor Lutz. Discussion, questions on the resolution? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. There are no consideration of ordinances read at previous board meeting. There are none. Communications, do we have any communications, resolutions from other counties?
No resolutions, Mr. Chair.
Do we have Kewaunee County events? Supervisor Augustine.
Kewaunee County Breakfast on the Farm at Kinder Highland Farms this Sunday, 8 to noon.
So are you waiting tables at that this year? What are you doing?
Come on out and see.
Supervisor Lasansky.
I passed out the little pamphlets to come on, come all to our annual Alumni Festival, free event, 3 bands, food, everybody in the county or anywhere is invited. You don't have to have gone to Kewaunee High School, and it's a great time.
Oh, thank you. Any others? Supervisor Haskey.
Hey, I passed out information about the Smokehouse Jamboree done by Violence Intervention Project, Goma. It's a free event to go to, and the money is used for a very, very good cause. They are also doing the ball drop again, like last year, where the Algoma Fire Department will come with their ladder truck and drop numbered balls on the target and give away prizes. I know that Joanne has tickets with her if anybody's interested, and I have some with too before we leave. We'd appreciate any help you can with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mullenweider.
Happy birthday today to the United States Army, 247 years old. Hooah.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Chair comments already made. Meeting dates. We have July 19th is already scheduled, as I indicated. August 16th already scheduled as well. September 20th, I understand Supervisor Romden and Supervisor Poppy, there is a problem with the September 20th date. Correct? Proposed date, sorry. And did you, you wanted September 13th or September 27th? Do those?
Either one of those would be fine.
I would prefer the 13th, Mr. Chair, because in September is when the county administrator presents the annual budget to the county board. So I would prefer that be at an earlier time than a later time.
September 13th, work for everyone? I'll need a motion for that. Supervisor Patricia, second by Supervisor Romden. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn. Supervisor Dell, second by Supervisor Cole. All in favor of the motion signify by